The Confederation delegates expected a small ship. Perhaps a diplomatic shuttle carrying a handful of representatives who would beg for protection in exchange for whatever meager resources their primitive world could offer. That was how it had always worked. Young species came to the Confederation with their heads bowed, grateful for any scraps of attention the great powers might give them. The humans did not send a small ship. Station Korath was the largest military outpost in the Outer Territories. It hung in the void like a metal flower, its docking arms stretching out to receive vessels from 100 different worlds. Admiral Vorath had come here personally to meet the human delegation. He wanted to see these strange beings for himself, to judge whether they might be useful in some small way. He was standing in the observation deck when the alarms began to sound. "Multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace," a technician announced. Counting 12 large signatures. 36 medium. Over 200 small. Vorath's scales tightened against his skin. A fleet? They sent a fleet? The first ships appeared on the view screen, and Vorath felt something he had not felt in many years. Surprise. The human vessels were unlike anything in the Confederation database. They were not elegant or graceful. They were blocky, angular, covered in armor plating and weapons arrays. They looked like they had been built for one purpose only: war. At the head of the formation was a massive ship, larger than anything Vorath had ever seen from a species so young. Its hull was dark gray, marked with white letters that spelled out a name in the human language. USS Defiance. Impossible, Vorath whispered. How did they build such ships? High Counselor Serath materialized beside him, her energy form flickering with interest. It seems we underestimated them. On board the Defiance, Captain Nathan Cole watched the alien station grow larger through the viewport. He was a tall man, with graying hair and a scar that ran down his left cheek, a reminder of battles fought long ago. He had spent his entire adult life preparing for this moment, even though he had never known it would come. "All ships report ready, Captain," his executive officer announced. Commander Derek Santos was a shorter man with dark hair and calm eyes. He had served with Nathan for 15 years, through battles that had nearly killed them both. There was no one Nathan trusted more. "Good," Nathan said. "Tell them to hold formation. We want to make an impression, not start a fight." "Too late for that," Katie Morrison said from her station. "The station is powering up its defense systems." Nathan allowed himself a small smile. "They are scared. Good. Scared people, pay attention." The meeting took place in a conference room deep within Station Korath. The human delegation was small, just Nathan, Derek, and a diplomat named Grace Palmer. The Confederation side was larger, with Admiral Vorath, High Counselor Serath, and a dozen other representatives from various species. Vorath studied the humans with open curiosity. They were smaller than he had expected, with soft skin and no natural weapons. Their bodies seemed fragile, poorly designed for combat. Yet there was something in their eyes that made him uncomfortable, a hardness that did not match their physical forms. "We appreciate you coming such a long distance," Serath began, her voice gentle and welcoming. "The Confederation values all its allies, no matter how new they might be to the galactic community." Nathan nodded politely, but did not smile. "Thank you for receiving us. We know your situation is difficult." "Indeed it is," Vorath said, "which is why we must be direct. What exactly do you hope to contribute to this war? Your ships are impressive for such a young species, but the Dominion has destroyed fleets 10 times the size of yours." "We are aware of your losses," Nathan replied. "We have been monitoring the war for some time." "Then you understand the scale of what we face. The Dominion cannot be defeated through conventional means. They adapt, they absorb, they grow stronger with every victory." "We understand." Vorath leaned forward. Then what do you propose? Your vessels can serve as support ships, perhaps. Supply runs, evacuation duties. We would not ask you to face the Dominion directly. That would be asking too much of a species with so little experience in galactic warfare. The room fell silent. Nathan looked at Derek, then at Grace. Something passed between them. A shared understanding that needed no words. Admiral, Nathan said slowly, I think there has been a misunderstanding. We did not come here to ask for a role in your war. We came here to tell you that we are joining it. Voroth blinked. I do not understand. Humanity does not beg. We do not wait for permission. The Dominion threatens the entire galaxy, which means they threaten us. We will fight them with or without your help. The only question is whether the Confederation wants to stand beside us or get out of our way. Seroth's light pulsed with something that might have been shock. You speak with great confidence for a species that has never faced the Dominion in battle. Nathan met her gaze without flinching. With respect, High Counselor, you do not know what humanity has faced. We have spent our entire existence fighting. We fought the land, the sea, the sky. We fought disease and famine and the darkness of space. We fought each other for 200,000 years before we finally found peace. The Dominion thinks they know what war is. They are wrong. Grace Palmer spoke for the first time. Her voice was softer than Nathan's, but no less firm. The Confederation has been fighting this war for 3 years. In that time, you have lost over 4,000 ships and billions of lives. Your strategies have failed because you fight the way you have always fought. Predictable, careful, bound by rules and traditions that the Dominion does not share. And you think you can do better? Voroth asked. We know we can, Nathan said, because we do not fight like you. We do not follow patterns. We do not value our own lives above victory. When a human goes to war, they are prepared to die, but they are also prepared to do whatever it takes to win. The Dominion has never faced anything like us. They will not know what to do. The room was silent for a long moment. Voroth looked at Serath, then at the other delegates. He could see the doubt in their eyes, the disbelief. These soft-skinned creatures from a backwater planet thought they could defeat an enemy that had crushed civilizations far older and more powerful. But beneath the doubt, Voroth saw something else. Hope. Desperate, fragile hope. Very well, Serath said finally. We will give you a chance to prove yourselves. The Dominion's next target is Corax Prime. It is a world of great strategic importance. If it falls, the path to our core systems will be open. How many ships do you have defending it? Nathan asked. 900. It is the largest fleet we can spare. Nathan nodded. We will bring 70. Voroth made a sound of disbelief. 70? Against the Dominion? 70 will be enough. Nathan stood, signaling that the meeting was over. Admiral, I suggest you watch carefully when the battle begins. You might learn something. He turned and walked out of the room, his officers following behind him. Voroth watched them go, feeling a strange mixture of annoyance and curiosity. They are either very brave or very foolish, he said. Serath's light flickered thoughtfully. Perhaps they are both. Or perhaps they are something we have never seen before. And what is that? The ancient being was quiet for a moment. Corax Prime was a beautiful world. Its surface was covered in vast oceans of deep blue, and continents of green forests that stretched from horizon to horizon. 12 billion beings called it home, members of a peaceful species called the Korathi, who had never known war until the Dominion came. Now they huddled in underground shelters, waiting to see if they would live or die. Admiral Voroth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Confederation vessel Eternal Light. Around him, 900 ships held formation in orbit, their weapons charged and their crews ready. It was the largest fleet the Confederation had assembled in decades. But it did not feel like enough. The human ships have arrived, his sensor officer announced. 70 vessels, taking position on our left flank. WarHFY looked at the tactical display. The human fleet was tiny compared to his own, a small cluster of gray shapes among the elegant curves of Confederation vessels. The USS Defiance sat at their center, its angular hull dark against the stars. "Open a channel to Captain Cole," WarHFY ordered. Nathan's face appeared on the view screen. He looked calm, almost relaxed, as if he were preparing for a training exercise, rather than a battle that would decide the fate of billions. "Admiral," Nathan said with a nod, "your fleet looks impressive." "As does yours," WarHFY replied, though he did not mean it. "I have assigned your ships to defensive positions around the planet. You will protect the evacuation transports if the battle goes badly." There was a pause. Then Nathan smiled, and something in that smile made WarHFY's scales tighten. "With respect, Admiral, we did not come here to run. We came here to fight. Captain, I understand your enthusiasm, but you must understand the enemy we face. The Dominion will bring at least 2,000 ships to this battle, perhaps more. Your vessels cannot survive a direct engagement. Then I suppose we will have to be quick." Before WarHFY could respond, alarms began to sound across the bridge. The sensor officer's voice was tight with fear. "Contact. Multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace. Admiral, I am counting over 2,000 ships." WarHFY turned to the view screen. The Dominion fleet was appearing in waves, their organic hulls pulsing with sickly purple light. They moved as one, a single mind controlling thousands of vessels with perfect coordination. At their center was a command ship, the size of a small moon, its surface covered in neural tendrils that reached out to touch every ship in the fleet. "All ships, prepare for combat," WarHFY commanded. "Focus fire on their forward elements. Do not let them reach the planet." The battle began. Confederation ships opened fire with plasma arrays that had been the most powerful weapons in the galaxy for millennia. Beams of superheated energy lanced across the void, striking Dominion vessels and burning through their organic armor. Ships exploded. Debris scattered into space. But the Dominion did not slow down. For every ship that fell, 2 more took its place. Their hulls regenerated damage almost as quickly as it was dealt. Their weapons, strange biological cannons that fired concentrated acid, began to tear through Confederation shields. Within minutes, WarHFY had lost 50 ships. "They are adapting to our weapons," his tactical officer reported. "Our plasma arrays are becoming less effective." WarHFY gripped the arms of his command chair. This was how it always happened. The Dominion learned. The Dominion adapted. The Dominion won. Then the humans moved. The USS Defiance accelerated forward, breaking from the defensive formation and heading directly toward the Dominion line. Behind it, the human fleet spread out in a pattern that looked like chaos, ships moving independently, without any apparent coordination. "What are they doing?" WarHFY demanded. "They are breaking formation." Nathan's voice came over the communication channel. "Admiral, I suggest you watch closely. You might want to take notes." The human ships opened fire. WarHFY had studied the reports on human weapons. He knew they still used primitive technologies, nuclear warheads and kinetic projectiles, alongside more advanced plasma systems. He had dismissed these weapons as outdated relics of a less advanced age. He had been wrong. Nuclear missiles streaked across the void in dense clusters, too many for the Dominion to intercept. They struck enemy ships in brilliant flashes of white light, overwhelming regenerative abilities that could heal plasma burns, but could not reassemble atoms torn apart by nuclear fire. Kinetic rounds, simple metal slugs, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, punched through bioarmor that had shrugged off energy weapons. But it was not just the weapons that surprised WarHFY. It was the way the humans fought. Every human ship moved independently, each captain making decisions without waiting for orders. They did not follow patterns or stick to formations. They adapted moment by moment, exploiting weaknesses as they appeared, retreating when threatened and attacking when opportunity arose. To WarHFY's tactical computers, It looked like madness, but somehow, impossibly, it was working. Lieutenant Katie Morrison flew her strike fighter through a gap in the Dominion line, her hands steady on the controls. Behind her, Weapons Officer Ryan Palmer tracked targets with cold efficiency. 3 interceptors on our tail, Ryan reported. I see them. Katie rolled the fighter hard to port, then cut her engines and spun the ship 180 degrees. For a moment, she was flying backward, facing the pursuing enemy ships. Fox 3. Missiles launched from her fighter's forward tubes. The Dominion interceptors tried to evade, but Katie had anticipated their movements. All 3 exploded in flashes of nuclear light. Nice shot, Ryan said. Save the compliments for after we win. Across the battlefield, human pilots performed similar feats. They fought like nothing the Dominion had ever encountered, unpredictable and relentless. The hive mind tried to adapt, tried to find patterns in the human tactics, but there were no patterns. Each human was an individual, making choices based on instinct and training that no collective intelligence could predict. On the bridge of the eternal light, WarHFY watched in amazement as the tide of battle began to turn. The Dominion was still advancing, still fighting, but they were taking losses they had never taken before. Human ships darted through their formations, striking weak points and vanishing before the hive mind could respond. Admiral, his tactical officer said, voice filled with disbelief, the humans have destroyed over 200 enemy ships. And their losses? 3 vessels. Only 3. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it was over, the Dominion fleet had been shattered. Over 500 of their ships had been destroyed, and the rest were retreating into hyperspace. The Confederation had lost 300 vessels. The humans had lost 12. WarHFY stood on his bridge, staring at the tactical display. He had fought the Dominion for 3 years. He had watched them destroy fleet after fleet, consume world after world. He had begun to believe that nothing could stop them. Today, 70 human ships had done what 900 Confederation vessels could not. Captain Cole, WarHFY said slowly, opening a channel to the Defiance. I owe you an apology. Nathan's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired, his uniform stained with sweat and his eyes heavy with exhaustion, but he was smiling. No apology necessary, Admiral. We are all on the same side. How did you do it? Our weapons barely slowed them down. Yours tore them apart. Nathan was quiet for a moment. The Dominion fights as one mind. Every ship, every soldier, every drone shares the same thoughts. That is their strength, but it is also their weakness. They cannot imagine fighting any other way. They expect their enemies to be like them, coordinated and predictable. And humans are not predictable. No, Admiral, we are not. We spent 200,000 years fighting each other, learning to outthink and outmaneuver enemies who look just like us. We learned that the only way to survive is to be unpredictable, to adapt faster than your opponent, to never give up, even when everything seems lost. Nathan paused. The Dominion has never faced anything like humanity, and now they know it. WarHFY looked at the wreckage floating in space, the remains of an enemy that had seemed invincible. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. Captain Cole, he said, I believe this is the beginning of a very important alliance. Nathan nodded. I believe you are right. The victory at Corax Prime changed everything. For the first time in 3 years, the Dominion had been stopped. Not just slowed, not just delayed, but truly defeated. Word of the battle spread across the Confederation like wildfire, carried by traitors and refugees and soldiers returning from the front lines. They spoke of the humans in hushed tones. They described ships that moved like predators, pilots who fought without fear, captains who smiled in the face of certain death. Some called them saviors. Others called them monsters, But everyone agreed on one thing. The humans were not what anyone had expected. In the weeks that followed, humanity pushed deeper into contested space. They did not wait for the Confederation to assign them missions. They did not ask permission. They simply identified where the Dominion was weakest and attacked, liberating colony after colony from the grip of the hive mind. Captain Nathan Cole became a legend. Stories spread about the scarred commander who led his ships into impossible battles and always emerged victorious. Children on distant worlds played games where they pretended to be human soldiers. Artists created paintings of the USS Defiance, its dark hull silhouetted against burning enemy fleets. But behind the legends, the reality was much harder. Commander Derek Santos found Nathan alone in his quarters late one night, 3 weeks after Korak's prime. The captain was sitting in the dark, staring at a holographic display that showed a list of names. Derek did not need to ask what the names represented. 847, Nathan said without looking up. That is how many we lost taking back the mining colony on Verath. Derek sat down across from him. It was a necessary victory. The ore from that colony will build 100 new ships. I know. Nathan's voice was flat. I know the mathematics. Every life we spend now saves more lives later. But knowing does not make it easier. No, it does not. They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside the viewport, stars drifted past, cold and uncaring. Somewhere out there, the Dominion was regrouping, learning from their defeats, preparing for the next assault. The crew is talking, Derek said finally. They say you have not slept in 3 days. I will sleep when this is over. Nathan. Derek leaned forward, his voice firm. If you burn out, this fleet loses its best commander. The crew needs you at your best, not running on fumes and determination. Nathan finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, heavy with exhaustion. Do you know what the Dominion did to the prisoners they took at Verath? Derek's jaw tightened. I read the reports. Reports do not capture it. I saw the footage. They do not just kill their prisoners, Derek. They absorb them. They take their minds and add them to the hive. Our people, our soldiers, turned into drones that fight against their own families. Nathan's hands clenched into fists. How am I supposed to sleep knowing that? There was no good answer. Derek stayed with his friend until the early hours of the morning, talking about nothing important, simply being present. It was all he could offer. Meanwhile, on the hospital ship USS Mercy, Dr. Samantha Green was facing her own battles. The Mercy was the largest medical vessel in the human fleet, designed to handle casualties from major engagements. In the past month, it had been running at triple capacity. Every bed was full. Every corridor was lined with wounded soldiers waiting for treatment. The medical staff worked in shifts that stretched far beyond what regulations allowed, because there was simply no other choice. Samantha stood in the operating room, her hands steady as she worked to save a young pilot who had taken shrapnel through his chest. His name was Marcus Webb. He was 23 years old. He had been flying strike fighters for less than a year. Clamp, she ordered, and her assistant handed her the instrument without a word. The surgery took 4 hours. When it was over, Marcus was stable but unconscious, his chest wrapped in regenerative bandages that would help him heal over the coming weeks. Samantha stepped back, stripped off her gloves, and allowed herself a moment to breathe. Dr. Green? A nurse stood in the doorway, her face pale. There is something you need to see. Samantha followed her to the receiving bay, where a small transport had just docked. Inside, strapped to a medical bed, was a figure in a tattered uniform. Samantha did not recognize him at first. His face was swollen, his body covered in wounds that looked like they had been inflicted with surgical precision. Then she saw the name tag on his uniform. Ensign Carlos Reyes. Her blood went cold. Carlos had been captured at Verath 3 weeks ago. He was on the list of soldiers presumed dead, absorbed into the Dominion hive. But here he was, alive. They sent him back, the nurse whispered. The Dominion sent him back. Samantha moved closer, examining the ensign with professional detachment, even as horror churned in her stomach. The wounds were not random. They formed patterns, symbols in a language she did not recognize. And his eyes, when they flickered open, were not quite right. There was something behind them, something watching. Get him into isolation, Samantha ordered. Full quarantine protocols. No one touches him without my permission. Is he dangerous? Samantha looked at Carlos, at the thing wearing his face, and understood what the Dominion had done. They had not sent him back out of mercy. They had sent him back as a message, a warning, a demonstration of what awaited every human who fell into their hands. So, get me a channel to Captain Cole, she said. He needs to know about this. Everyone needs to know. The footage spread through the fleet within hours. Every ship, every soldier, every crew member saw what the Dominion had done to Carlos Reyes. They saw the symbols carved into his flesh. They heard the words he whispered in his sleep, fragments of Dominion thoughts leaking through whatever remained of his human mind. Some soldiers wept. Some grew quiet, turning inward to process their fear. A few requested transfers to non-combat positions, unable to face the prospect of such a fate. But most of them got angry. Nathan Cole called a fleet-wide broadcast that evening. His face appeared on every screen, calm and steady, despite the exhaustion that lined his features. You have all seen what the Dominion does to prisoners, he said. They meant it to frighten us. They meant it to break our spirit, to make us doubt, to make us consider surrender. He paused, letting the silence stretch. They do not understand us. They cannot understand us, because humans do not break. We have faced extinction 100 times in our history. We have survived ice ages, and plagues, and wars that killed millions. We have stared into the abyss, again and again, and every time, we have refused to fall. His voice hardened. The Dominion wants to absorb us. They want to add our minds to their collective, to make us part of their hive. But they will never have us, because even if they take our bodies, they will never take our will. Every human who falls becomes a wound in their network, a piece of resistance they cannot digest, a voice screaming for freedom in the darkness of their shared mind. Nathan leaned forward, his eyes burning with cold fire. We did not start this war, but we are going to end it, not for glory, not for conquest, but because we are human, and humans do not surrender. Not now, not ever. The broadcast ended. Across the fleet, soldiers looked at each other with new determination. Fear was still there, lurking in the corners of their minds. But it was no longer the loudest voice. Rage was louder. In her quarters aboard the Mercy, Samantha Green sat alone, thinking about Carlos Reyes and all the others who had been lost. She thought about the war ahead, the battles yet to be fought, the price that humanity would pay before this was over. But she also thought about Nathan's words, about the stubborn, defiant core of human nature that refused to accept defeat even when all hope seemed lost. The Dominion had made a mistake. They had tried to break humanity with fear. They had only made them stronger. The final battle began on a cold morning in the void of space, above a world that had no name in any Confederation database. The planet was a twisted mass of organic spires and pulsing neural networks, its surface covered in structures that looked more grown than built. This was the heart of the Dominion, the central nexus from which the hive mind controlled its entire empire. If it fell, the war would be over. The combined fleet numbered over 4,000 ships. Confederation vessels in elegant curves of silver and gold flew alongside the angular gray hulls of human warships. Races that had been strangers months ago now fought as brothers, united by desperation and hope in equal measure. At the head of the formation flew the USS Defiance. Its hull was scarred from dozens of battles, patched and repaired so many times that barely any of the original metal remained. On its bridge, Captain Nathan Cole stood at the center of his crew, watching the enemy world grow larger on the view screen. Admiral WarHFY's voice came over the communication channel. "All ships report ready, Captain Cole. We await your command." Nathan smiled at that. A year ago, the Confederation would never have allowed a human to lead their forces. Now, after countless battles and shared sacrifices, things were different. The war had forged them into something new, a true alliance of equals. "All ships," Nathan said, his voice carrying across the fleet. "This is the moment we have been fighting for. Beyond that planet lies the mind that controls the Dominion. Every ship they have, every soldier they command, every world they have consumed, it all flows from that single point. We destroy it, and we destroy them." High Counselor Seraph materialized on the bridge beside him, her energy form flickering with anticipation. "The Dominion will throw everything they have at us. Our intelligence suggests over 3,000 ships defending the Nexus. Then we will face 3,000 ships. Many of us will not survive this day." Nathan turned to look at her. His eyes were tired but steady, holding a resolve that had been tempered in the fire of 100 battles. "I know, but we will win. That is the only thing that matters now." The Dominion fleet emerged from the planet's shadow like a swarm of insects, thousands of organic vessels pulsing with malevolent energy. At their center was the command ship, a massive structure the size of a small moon, its surface covered in neural tendrils that connected to every ship in the armada. "All ships, engage," Nathan ordered. The void erupted in fire. Plasma beams and nuclear missiles crisscrossed the space between the fleets. Ships exploded on both sides, their debris scattering into the darkness. The Dominion fought with desperate fury, knowing that the loss of their homeworld would mean the end of everything they were. Lieutenant Katie Morrison led her squadron through the chaos, her fighter weaving between enemy ships with impossible precision. Behind her flew 6 pilots, all that remained of the 40 she had started the war with. Each of them had lost friends and comrades. Each of them had something to prove. "Strike Squadron, form up on me," Katie commanded. "We are going for the Nexus." "The defenses are too heavy," Ryan Palmer replied from the gunner seat behind her. "We will never make it through." "Then we will die trying. It is not like we have anywhere else to be." They dove toward the planet, skimming the edge of the Dominion fleet and drawing fire from every direction. Ships fell around them. Explosions lit the void like brief stars. She could not afford to. On the Defiance, Nathan watched the battle unfold on the tactical display. The Allied fleet was holding its own, but losses were mounting on both sides. The Dominion was throwing everything into this fight, and they still had numerical advantage. "Captain," Derek Santos said, "the enemy command ship is moving. They are positioning it behind their defensive line." Nathan studied the display. The command ship was the key. Every Dominion vessel drew its orders from that massive structure. If they could destroy it, the entire enemy fleet would lose coordination. But it was heavily protected, surrounded by hundreds of defenders, and shielded by layers of organic armor. "We need to punch a hole in their line," Nathan said. "All cruisers, focus fire on Sector 7. Create an opening. That will leave our flank exposed." But we did not come here to play it safe. The human cruisers broke formation and accelerated toward the designated sector, their weapons blazing. The Dominion responded, redirecting ships to counter the threat. For a moment, their defensive line wavered. "There," Nathan said. "Strike Squadron, you have your opening. Go now." Katie saw the gap appear on her tactical display. It was narrow, barely wide enough for her fighters to pass through, and it would not last long. But it was enough. "All fighters, maximum thrust, Do not stop for anything. They shot through the opening like arrows, leaving the chaos of the main battle behind. Ahead of them, the command ship loomed, its neural tendrils pulsing with the thoughts of a billion minds. Defensive turrets tracked their approach, filling the space with projectiles and energy beams. One by one, her squadron fell. Martinez took a direct hit and vanished in a ball of flame. Cooper's fighter lost power and drifted into the path of an enemy vessel. Zhang managed to eject before her ship exploded, but there was no one to rescue her in the middle of an active battle. By the time Katie reached the command ship, she was alone. "Katie, pull back," Nathan's voice crackled over the radio. "You cannot do this alone." "Watch me," she replied. She armed her remaining missiles, all 4 of them, and pushed her throttle to maximum. The command ship's surface rushed toward her, filling her entire view. She could see the neural nexus now, a massive structure at the heart of the ship, glowing with psychic energy. "For everyone we lost," she whispered. She fired. The missiles struck true, piercing the outer hull and burying themselves in the neural nexus. Then the explosions began. Chain reactions spreading through the command ship like fire through dry wood. Katie pulled up hard, her fighter scraping against organic matter as she fought to escape the expanding devastation. Behind her, the command ship tore itself apart, its destruction sending shockwaves through the entire Dominion fleet. Across the battlefield, something changed. The Dominion vessels, which had been fighting with perfect coordination, suddenly faltered. Some stopped moving entirely. Others began firing wildly, no longer guided by the central intelligence. Ships collided with each other, formations collapsed, and the hive minds screamed, a psychic death cry that echoed across the void. "The Nexus is destroyed," Vorath reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "The Dominion is breaking apart." Nathan watched as the enemy fleet dissolved into chaos. Ships were fleeing in random directions, crashing into each other, or simply shutting down as their connection to the hive was severed. It was over. After 3 years of war, after countless battles and millions of lives lost, it was finally over. "All ships, cease fire," Nathan ordered. "Let them run. We have won." The aftermath was quiet in a way that felt almost unreal. The combined fleet drifted among the wreckage of the Dominion Armada, their crews too exhausted to celebrate. They had won, but the cost had been staggering. Over 1,000 Allied ships had been destroyed. Tens of thousands of soldiers would never return home. Katie Morrison was found drifting in her damaged fighter, unconscious but alive. Her ship had been crippled in the escape from the command vessel, but somehow she had survived. When she woke up in the medical bay of the Mercy, the first thing she saw was Nathan Cole standing beside her bed. "You did it," he said simply. "We did it," she corrected. Nathan nodded, a tired smile crossing his face. "We did." In the years that followed, humanity took its place among the stars, not as a minor species to be ignored, not as primitive creatures to be pitied, but as equals. The Confederation rebuilt itself with human help, and the alliance that had been forged in war became the foundation for a new era of peace. Admiral Vorath commissioned a monument on Corax Prime, a simple stone pillar inscribed with the names of every being who had fallen in the war. At its base was a phrase written in 100 languages, words that would be remembered long after the last witness to the war had passed away. They came when we called. They stayed when we fell. They fought when we could not. And across the galaxy, in corners of space where no human had ever traveled, species began to hear the stories. Tales of a young race from a small blue world, who had looked upon the most terrifying enemy the galaxy had ever known, and refused to flinch. Tales of pilots who flew into certain death with smiles on their faces. Tales of captains who never surrendered, soldiers who never broke, a people who treated the impossible as merely difficult. To them, humans had been mere rumors, whispers in the void, stories told by travelers who had visited the far reaches of the Orion Arm. Now they were something else entirely. The Galactic Confederation had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They had mapped most of the known galaxy. They had made contact with 47 different species. They had built stations that floated between worlds, and ships that could cross the void in mere days. They believed they knew everything there was to know about intelligent life in the universe. But in the far edges of the Orion Arm, in a small and unremarkable solar system, there lived a species they had only heard about in strange transmissions and old stories passed from trader to trader. The humans. No one in the Confederation had ever met a human face to face. Some said they were violent and dangerous. Others said they were primitive and weak. A few ancient records mention them as a young species, barely 2 centuries into space travel, not worth the attention of the great galactic powers. Most species in the Confederation had simply forgotten they existed. But that was about to change. Admiral WarHFY stood in the Great Council Chamber on Station Serenity, the political heart of the Confederation. He was a Kelvani, a species of tall reptilian beings with scales the color of dark emeralds and eyes that could see in complete darkness. He had served the Confederation for over 80 years. He had fought in dozens of battles. He had never known fear until now. "The Dominion has taken another 12 worlds," he announced to the gathered delegates. His voice was steady, but those who knew him could hear the weight behind his words. "Our fleet at the Verat system was destroyed. All 900 ships. There were no survivors." Silence fell over the chamber. The delegates represented species from across the galaxy. Some were beings of pure light. Others were massive creatures with shells of living stone. A few were so strange that other species could barely comprehend their forms. But all of them shared the same expression now. Fear. The Dominion of Shadows had appeared from the dark spaces between galaxies 3 years ago. They were a hive mind, millions of beings sharing a single consciousness. They did not negotiate. They did not trade. They did not show mercy. They simply consumed. World after world had fallen to their endless hunger. The Confederation, for all its power and history, was losing. High Counselor Serath floated at the center of the chamber. She was an ancient being, a creature of pure energy who had existed for thousands of years. Her light flickered with concern as she processed the Admiral's report. "What options remain to us?" she asked. WarHFY lowered his head. "We have committed all available forces. Our shipyards are working at full capacity. But the Dominion grows stronger with every world they take. They absorb the populations, add them to the hive. Our own people are being turned against us." A delegate from the Morath Collective spoke up. "Then we must seek allies. There must be other species, other powers who can help us." "We have contacted everyone within our reach," WarHFY replied. "Those who are not already fighting alongside us are either too weak to matter or too far away to arrive in time." "Not everyone." The voice came from a communications officer at the edge of the chamber. She was young, her scales still bright with youth, and she looked nervous to be speaking before such powerful beings. But she held up a data tablet with trembling hands. "We received a transmission 2 hours ago," she said. "From the Sol system." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Sol system. That was where the humans lived. "What do they want?" Serath asked. "They want to join the war." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then laughter began to ripple through the delegates. The Morath representative made a sound of amusement. Even WarHFY allowed himself a small smile. "The humans?" another delegate said. "Those primitives. They have been spacefaring for barely 200 years. What could they possibly offer against the Dominion?" Perhaps they have resources, someone suggested. Raw materials. Their system is said to be rich in metals. Or perhaps they simply wish to die with honor, another added. Some species prefer that, to waiting for the end. Serath's light pulsed thoughtfully. We will hear their offer. It costs us nothing to listen. Far across the galaxy, in orbit around a small blue planet called Earth, a very different conversation was taking place. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the carrier USS Vanguard, watching the stars through the main viewport. He was a man of 43 years, with short gray hair and a face lined by years of service. He had joined the United Earth Fleet as a young ensign, and had worked his way up through the ranks. He had seen the best and worst of humanity. He knew what his species was capable of. Beside him stood Lieutenant Katie Morrison, his tactical officer. She was younger, barely 30, with sharp eyes and a mind that could process battle data faster than most computers. She was studying a holographic display that showed the latest intelligence from the Confederation's war. They lost another fleet, she said quietly. The Dominion is moving faster now. At this rate, they will reach Confederation core space within 6 months. Daniel nodded slowly. And after that they will keep going. They will not stop until they have consumed everything. Including us. Including us. Do you think the Confederation will accept our help? Daniel was quiet for a moment. He thought about all the stories he had heard growing up. Stories about humanity's first steps into space. Stories about how the other species had ignored them, dismissed them as too young and too primitive to matter. For 2 centuries, humanity had been alone in the void, building their strength in silence. They will accept, he said finally. They have no choice. And when they see what we can do, they will understand. Understand what? Daniel turned away from the viewport. His eyes were hard, but there was something else there too. Something that burned like a cold flame. That humans are not primitive. We are not weak. We spent 200,000 years fighting each other, surviving against impossible odds, adapting to every challenge the universe threw at us. The Dominion thinks it knows war. He paused, and a grim smile crossed his face. They have no idea what war really means. Katie watched him for a moment, then nodded. She had served under many officers, but none like Daniel Hayes. He was not a man who made empty promises. When do we leave? She asked. As soon as the fleet is assembled. 12 carriers, 36 cruisers, 200 support ships, everything we have. That is not much compared to what the Dominion has. Daniel turned back to the stars. Somewhere out there, a war was raging that would decide the fate of the galaxy. Somewhere out there, species who had never heard of Earth were dying by the millions. And somewhere out there, an enemy waited that thought it could not be stopped. It will be enough, he said. It has to be.